Welcome to Serious Rock Talk Crime.
Hello. Today we're going to speak about one of the most gifted and troubled people in popular music. If you don't know the name Phil Spector, it's almost impossible that you haven't heard one of the many hits he produced. On the morning of February the 3rd, 2003, he killed a woman in his home, a woman he had just met hours before.
One of rock and roll's legendary music producers is a murder suspect tonight. Right now, Phil Spector is out of jail after posting $1 million bail. He's accused of shooting a woman to death in his suburban Los Angeles home.
She is an adult. She is a female Caucasian.
Police were saying little else about the woman in her 20s found dead in the foyer of Spector's Hilltop mansion. A luxury car was in the driveway. Police say it was being held as part of the investigation. A gun has also been recovered. Someone called 911 reporting shots fired at the $1 million home in the pre-dawn hours.
Okay, this is the tale of how that happened. Like all stories, let's begin at the beginning. Harvey Philip Spector, born in the Bronx, December 26, 1939. As a child, Spector was asthmatic, allergic to the sun, and dominated by an overprotective mother. Why his father committed suicide is unknown. One morning, he headed off to his job in Brooklyn, parked, and then ran a hose from the exhaust pipe to the interior of his running car. Phil was 12 years old. With the family in tatters, his mother eventually moved young Phil and his sister Sharon to Los Angeles. She went to work as a seamstress. While it was here that Spector put himself on the road to fame, his early teen years were difficult. Spector was awkward and withdrawn as a child. Friends knew that highly volatile relationships with his mother and sister contributed to the darker side of his personality. From the start, he was a fabulist, a megalomaniac. He told his friends tall stories. He sometimes stalked his girlfriends. He played French horn in the school band and at some point had the epiphany so many notable musicians of his era had when he started connecting with some of the new mysterious sounds coming out of the radio. He began to play guitar, specifically jazz guitar. His enthusiasm was such that he wrote to Downbeat magazine to defend the work of a local LA session guitarist, Barney Kessel. He eventually met Kessel, who became Spector's ticket to the world of elite LA musicians. At the same time, he was experimenting with music with a trio of high school friends. The four began harmonizing together, and Spector instinctively taking charge. After some personnel changes, the group was known as the Teddy Bears. Outside of his other spectacular talents, Spector seems to have had an innate precocity when it came to figuring out how a record got made. Not exactly a typical skill of teenagers at the time. With $40 from his bandmates, he took them to Gold Star Studios, where they recorded a song called Don't You Worry My Little Pet. He parlayed that into an agreement with the local company to record a few more songs. For the B-side of Pet, they sang another Spector tune, To Know Him Is to Love Him. It became a U.S. #1 hit. Within a few years, Phil Spector was a cultural icon, a flamboyant impresario with an impressive string of hit singles, each one a maelstrom of emotion sung by a woman. strolling through the scene as a pop preeminence, dressed now like a gangster, like a psychedelic leprechaun. Spector was memorably profiled by Tom Wolfe as the first tycoon of teen, and hung out with friends like Lenny Bruce, Dennis Hopper, and John Lennon. And then for almost 30 years he largely disappeared from public view, only to reappear, horrifyingly, as the murderer of an actress who was working as a hostess at an LA restaurant, whom he had lured back to his castle-like mansion in an obscure suburb in the early hours. Stripped down to its essentials, it is also a story we know too well, the tale of the celebrity who uses his fame and money to get away with appalling behavior for far too many years. Spector has the dubious distinction of taking it further than anyone else, of sticking a gun into the face of a defenseless Lana Clarkson. His fame came from a precocity, not just in music, but an ability to envision a world around the corner, one in which Baroque pop constructions, little teenage symphonies for the kids, he called them, would thrill a new moneyed class of teenagers. Spector sensed the need, and he had the innate skills to create a new form of music to realize them. In 1960, after working as an apprentice to Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller, Spector co-founded Phil's Records at the age of 21. He became the youngest ever U.S. label owner at the time, certainly the first tycoon of teen. The musicians from his de facto house band, later known as the Wrecking Crew, rose to industry fame through his hit records. His signature wall of sound consisted of 1 or 2 or 3 pianos, 4 or 5 or 6 guitars, as many bassists, drummers, and percussionists, all playing together precisely and recorded with preternatural care to form a tsunami of aural effect. Over it, he took some of the songs by some of the nation's best songwriters and married them to the yearning, indelible voices of young singers. The result was an emotionalism on a scale that simply had never been conceived of before. Leonard Cohen once said, Spector's real greatness is his ability to induce those incredible little moments of poignant longing in us. Now, it's probably true to say that he expanded the sound of pop and the very possibilities of the form more radically than any other person in the years between the heyday of Sun Records and the rise of the Beatles. The results are not just familiar, but seem like they've always been there. She's the Rebel, the Do Run Run by the Crystals, Be My Baby and Walking in the Rain by the Ronettes, a series of hits for the Righteous Brothers, culminating in You've Lost That Love and Feeling, and then River Deep, Mountain High, crafted for the voice of Tina Turner. They are a dim part of that cultural landscape now. At the time, they created a new center of gravity for the world of pop. At the same time, he was a true musician. The top-tier session players he worked with said he could have had a career as a professional jazz guitarist. He had a vast knowledge and affection for R&B by black artists. Many of those he worked with recall him as a man of unending energy, zany humor, and enthusiasm, able to keep a large core of session musicians engaged while putting them through the grueling processes that undergirded his productions. And yet the darkness was always there for those who looked. The meanness, the lack of effect when it came to the feelings of others, the way he controlled women, the obsession with his looks and feelings of inadequacy, the emotional scab-picking, the jealousies, the errant cruelties. What I wish to establish here is how incredible Spector was at the beginning of his career, how innovative and brave and novel. There were 3 basic types of producers before Spector came along: the high-minded organizer, the shrewd businessman, and the studio innovator. Spector took all 3, added his own gift, and created a new concept, the producer as overall director of the creative process, from beginning to end. And in doing so, he put out a group of the most memorable records in all of pop music, from then to now. He took control of everything. He picked the artists, wrote or requested the material, supervised the arrangements, told the singers how to phrase, masterminded all phases of the recording process with the most painful attention to detail, and released the result on his own label, a label with no affiliation with any of the supposedly all-powerful major record companies. He introduced many innovations. By concentrating all his efforts on one record at a time, he avoided the wasteful scattershot policy of the major labels, and by bringing the technique of overdubbing to a new peak as part of the artistic process, he created a sound never heard before, something which came to be known throughout the world as the Spector sound, or, more popular, the wall of sound. But putting all that aside for an instant, what of the strange terror people have heard in Spector's music? Springsteen called it, quote, violence covered in sugar and candy. Okay, that's who he was professionally. Now let's begin our walk to his castle-like mansion in the suburb of Los Angeles. It's not far. We will arrive sometime in the morning of February the 3rd, 2003. First, though, a sidebar to help us better understand Phil's state of mind. In 1973, Lennon hired Spector to helm a record of rock and roll cover songs. Spector routinely arrived late to the studio, high on amyl nitrate, wearing elaborate costumes, one night a surgeon, the next night a karate expert, with an ever-present pistol tucked in a hip holster. One night, for a prank, Spector fired the gun in the control room, inches from the former Beatles' ear. An enraged Lennon yelled, "Phil, if you're going to kill me, but don't F with my ears. I need them." Another time, Spector pulled his gun and chased Lennon through the hallways of the studio, screaming threats. Next, he was recording an album with Leonard Cohen. One night, Spector grabbed Cohen, a bottle of wine in one hand and a revolver in the other. Shoving the gun against Cohen's neck, he said, "Leonard, I love you." Cohen slowly pushed the barrel away, replying, "I hope you do, Phil." And Debbie Harry held her tongue for many years, but in 2007, when Spector went on trial for the murder of actress Lana Clarkson, Harry spoke out. In the late 1970s, when Spector was hoping to make a comeback, he invited Harry to his mansion to discuss a studio collaboration. The meeting went sour fast. "He pulled a gun," Harry recalled. "That notorious thing he does. He stuck it in my boot and it went bang. I thought, get me out of here. I just want to go home. Why would anyone be carrying a .45 automatic in their home?" And the Ramones, during a recording gig with Phil, an exhausted D.D. Ramone said he was going home, and Spector reached for his revolver. "You're not going anywhere," he said. The bassist replied, "What are you going to do? Shoot me? Go ahead, Phil. I'm leaving. Goodbye." And then finally, Ronnie Spector. After their marriage in 1968, Spector held the young bride hostage in his mansion, isolating her from the world and squashing her musical ambitions. His cruelty knew no bounds. He tied her up and locked her in the closet. He hid her shoes so she couldn't walk out on him. Creepiest of all, he installed a gold coffin with a glass top in the basement, promising that he would kill her and display her corpse if she ever left him. Okay, Sigmund Freud would be spinning in his grave. Phil Spector was obviously very ill for a very long time. Let's let the prosecution at his first trial have a word.
And that evidence, ladies and gentlemen, is going to paint a very, very clear picture. A picture of a man, Philip Spector, who, when he's confronted with the right circumstances, when he's confronted with the right situation, turns sinister and deadly. The evidence is going to paint a picture of a man who, on February 3rd, 2003, put a loaded pistol in Lana Clarkson's mouth, inside her mouth, and shot her to death. But to understand more fully, more globally, why Philip Spector would have done what he did, how Lana Clarkson fell victim to this man. You're going to be introduced to evidence of the defendant's very rich history of violence.
That was Alan Jackson, the DA in Spector's first trial. At this point, we hardly need motive for the crime, do we? And Phil Spector certainly had the opportunity. Okay, February the 3rd, 2003, Los Angeles, late at night. The bars are closing. Phil Spector is at the House of Blues on the Sunset Strip. He meets Lana Clarkson, a 40-year-old actress who works as a hostess. When they met, Clarkson didn't know who he was. In fact, she thought he was a woman, something that didn't sit well with Phil. A little before 5 a.m., Spector announces he is ready to go home. So is Clarkson, and as they leave, she grabs a bottle of tequila off the bar, then walks up to Spector's limo. Later, he said his intention was simply to give the woman a lift home. She asks if they could detour via his castle-like mansion on the way. They go to the house, as far as the foyer. After that, well, a few hours later, Clarkson was found dead in the foyer. Her body was discovered slumped in a chair with a single gunshot wound to her mouth, with broken teeth scattered over the carpet. Spector's driver, Adriano de Souza, said Spector had come out of the house holding a gun, saying, "I think I killed someone." Well, let's hear it from the driver himself.
It was a dark night, no cars around. It's on the top of the mountain. There's no noise around. Like 5 o'clock in the morning, around 5 o'clock, I heard a noise. I tried to investigate what happened. I opened the door. I checked to see if it was outside. The fountain was on. Everything pretty normal. I went inside the car, closed the door. And he opened the door. As soon as he opened the door, I jumped, went to the back door, and he was standing in the door with the gun in the hand.
That was Adriano de Souza, the man who drove Spector and Clarkson that fateful evening. Clarkson's handbag was over her shoulder, suggesting that she was preparing to leave or had never taken it off in the first place. Spector initially told police the shooting had been an accident. The time between Clarkson's killing and Spector's imprisonment was one of the more reprehensible spectacles of how celebrities accused of sexual inappropriateness and worse were given a pass. Spector was allowed out on bail. He was free to travel to New York. An Esquire article chronicled a night of partying there with David Letterman and bandleader Paul Schaefer and others. In the article, Clarkson is treated with palpable contempt. Quote, her name was Lana Clarkson, and she was a chronically aspiring, buxom, blonde B-movie actress, model, comedian, hostess, a type always common in Hollywood and not unknown at the mansion. She died of a gunshot to her head, and though she hasn't become a corpus delicti, whatever happened, it happened on February the 3rd, and no one's been charged with any crime at all, not yet. She did wind up dead, which is one heck of a kicker to the Phil Spector story, which hasn't exactly been lacking Gothic before, unquote. Talk about a tasteless article. Poor Esquire. How truly shabby. Okay, all this dovetailed conveniently with a key Spector defense, that Clarkson was a has-been or failed actress. This was to make the case that she had decided to commit suicide in Spector's foyer. Clarkson may or may not have been depressed, but in reality, she had worked steadily through 2001 when an accident left her with 2 broken wrists and disrupted her career. All of this played in for valuable PR for the producer as he created courtroom chaos and managed to delay the trial for years by causing scenes and firing lawyers. Phil Spector firmly stated his innocence. He didn't believe he had a history of violence. Let's hear it from Phil.
There was a dying woman there which needed medical attention, and there was still no paramedics there, yet we called for the paramedic. Phil Spector could never have done this. He could never stand up and shoot a girl in the mouth with a gun. Where's my history of this?
That was Phil Spector declaring his innocence. The trial started in April 2007. 6 women testified to visits to Spector's house that ended with his refusing to let them leave at the point of a gun. It ended in a mistrial, and everything started over. By the way, once he was imprisoned, his wife, Rachel Short, whom he had married in 2006, took over managing his affairs. After claiming she was spending too much money, Spector eventually divorced her from jail in 2018. Spector's defense team consisted of Robert Shapiro, the same man who defended O.J. Simpson. Clarkson's death was presented as an accidental suicide. LA police had already ruled out suicide and remained convinced that the shooting was a crime. In an interview, Spector said, quote, "It's the anatomy of a frame-up. There is no case. They have no case. He said that she kissed the gun. I have no idea why. I never knew her, never saw her before that night. I have no idea who she was or what her agenda was," unquote. He said the gun was not his, and presumably his own hands were clear of any incriminating residue. They were certainly clear of blood, and the DA's desk remained clear of evidence. And as the August arraignment date came and went, the police were still investigating. Spector's $1 million bail was extended to September the 30th. A summer of silence on the investigation was shattered on September the 19th when detectives finally presented their case to the DA, one that would unequivocally dismiss Spector's side of the story. They said that Clarkson's death was not an accident, not a suicide. They said Phil Spector shot her. They said she died of a single gunshot wound to the head and that she was shot by another person. They said the angle of the gun was pointed down, uncommon in a suicide. In the master bedroom, police found a white dinner jacket that Spector had been wearing during his evening out at the House of Blues. There was blood splatter on the sleeve of the jacket. It proved to be Clarkson's blood, and the gun was clean of prints because Phil wiped it on a cloth, which they found at Phil's place with Lana's blood on it. On March 19, 2007, Spector's murder trial began. Presiding Judge Larry Paul Fidler allowed the proceedings in Los Angeles Superior Court to be televised. On September 26, Fidler declared a mistrial because of a hung jury, 10-2 for conviction. The retrial of Spector for murder in the second degree began on October 20th, 2008, with Judge Fidler again presiding. The retrial was not televised. Spector was once again represented by attorney Jennifer Lee Berenger. The case went to jury on March 26, 2009, and 18 days later, on April the 13th, the jury returned a guilty verdict, 19 years in prison. Additionally, Spector was found guilty of using a firearm in the commission of a crime, which added 4 years to the sentence. He died in prison in 2021 at the age of 81. So where does this leave us? Phil Spector was likely some kind of genius. So here we have a man capable of producing many beautiful things, and we have at the same time a man capable of instigating different forms of torture, culminating in the murder of an innocent woman. It's a dichotomy of his personality which is confusing, the Jekyll and Hyde persona. He just doesn't seem like a criminal, which perhaps is the most dangerous kind of all. This is Dr. Ian Clarke, and you have been listening to Serious Rock Talk Crime. Until we meet again, as always, the beat goes on.